Meet Your Match. No Match for Love. Written by Lindzee Armstrong. Narrated by Tiffany Williams. Dedicated to my match, Neil. I love you. Chapter 1. Are you nervous? Brooke turned toward the open car window, closing her eyes as the sea breeze ruffled her hair. What do you think? Don't make this harder than it has to be. She heard the frown in her mom's voice, even if she couldn't see it. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw her mom reach to turn down the radio, then move her hand back to the steering wheel. You're the one making this hard, Brooke said. No, your father made this hard. I'm not the one who slept with my dental hygienist. Feet off the dashboard. Her mom's voice was clipped, her words laced with anger and frustration. Brooke complied, letting out an exaggerated sigh. Why can't I go to my old high school? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because we had to move. Maybe because I can't afford $1 million house on my paycheck. Maybe because you'll acclimate better if you attend the same school as our neighbors. I don't want to acclimate. Brooke made air quotes with her fingers. In 3 months, I haven't made a single friend at that stupid apartment complex. So why do I have to go to Canyon Crest? Brooke, please. She heard the exhaustion in her mother's tone, the pleading. Brooke hugged her backpack tighter to her chest. This sucks. Stupid dad. Stupid Shandy with her fake boobs and Botox. You'll make new friends soon enough. Look on the bright side. At least it's everyone else's first day, too. Her mom pulled to a stop in front of the school. It sprawled out over the property in numerous buildings, intimidating and large. Want me to walk you to class? Yeah, because that'll get me friends. I really wish you could walk me to class without making me look like a freak. I'll be fine, Mom. Brooke unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the car door. Her mom grabbed her hand, pulling her close for a quick kiss on the cheek. Good luck, sweetie. Yeah. Brooke felt her mom's gaze on her all the way into the school. She'd registered for classes last week, so she bypassed the front office and headed toward first period honors English in Building D. Apprehension had her legs shaking as she made her way across the campus dotted with palm trees. She hated this. She hated starting over. She hated her dad for doing this to them. Wasn't love supposed to be forever? She knew divorce happened, but it wasn't supposed to happen to her parents. They were the happily ever after everyone talked about. Except they weren't. Brooke had sensed things were unraveling months before the affair was exposed. It had been subtle, almost imperceptible. Late nights at the office, arguing between her parents, her dad suddenly making frequent gym visits. And Brooke had been forced to watch it all, dreading the inevitable end. Why had her dad hired stupid Shandy? Brooke clenched her jaw and flung open the door to Building D. Her ears instantly filled with the chatter of friends reuniting after summer break. Brooke weaved her way through the crowds of people congregating at open lockers, eyes steadfastly on her feet. She wasn't in the mood to introduce herself to new people and act like life was great when it wasn't. At least no one was coming up to her with sympathetic smiles and words that did nothing to make her feel better. Maybe a new start wouldn't be so bad after all. Here she didn't have to explain about the separation to anyone. Brooke found her locker and spun the dial, then placed her lunch inside. The bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until the tardy bell. Brooke hitched her backpack higher on her shoulder and headed toward room 108. The room wasn't unique. Bulletin boards covered in butcher paper, the smell of dry erase markers, and antiseptic. Desks on either side of the room faced each other, leaving a large aisle down the center. Brooke had never minded this type of classroom setup, until today. With only 3 rows of desks on each side, it would be harder to hide. A few students milled around the room, chatting with friends. Brooke took an empty seat on one of the back rows and sat down. She quickly pulled a book out of her backpack, Emma, her favorite Austen novel, and buried her face in it. Maybe if she read, she wouldn't have to introduce herself to anyone. I have to make friends eventually. This is where I'm stuck for the next 2 years. Even though her parents were in mediation, she had little hope the two would get back together. 2 years, then she could head to Los Angeles and become a real matchmaker. It had been her dream ever since reading an article about matchmaking in a magazine 3 years earlier, but her parents' separation made it seem hollow. Brooke closed her eyes, fighting back the pain. She was good at matching people up. She knew who would fit and who wouldn't. That giggling couple by the whiteboard, for example, they were sending out signals all over the place that they were into each other. His hand on her arm, her fingers twirling her hair, their eyes dancing away and back to each other. They would work, for a year or two at least, which is practically an eternity in high school terms. She knew it just like she knew the guy flirting with the girl by the pencil sharpener did it to show off to his friends. Luke! A boy with bleached blonde hair and skater shoes jumped across a desk and bumped fists with another guy. How was your summer? Awesome. The second boy grinned, and Brooke's breath caught in her throat. He had the straightest, whitest teeth she'd ever seen. And those eyes? They were so blue she could tell the color even from across the room. Not a light blue like hers, but darker, more intense. He wore a letterman's jacket and had cheekbones that were to die for. His hair was dark and messy and perfect. No, you're not allowed to have a crush on anyone this year, Brooke. She was through with men, at least temporarily. Heard you and Beth broke up, Skater Shoes said. Luke shrugged. It was good while it lasted. It lasted a month. Luke scratched his head. It wasn't working out. You'll find someone else soon, Skater Shoes said, then made kissing noises. Luke shoved the boy. Shut up, Chris. Luke motioned his head toward Brooke. She quickly buried her nose in her book, hoping they hadn't caught her staring. So who's the new girl? Luke asked in a lowered voice. It was almost a whisper, and Brooke struggled to pick out the words. Not sure. Transfer from another high school? Brooke sunk a little lower in her seat, feeling her cheeks heat. She had to fill in a few blanks, but caught the gist of what they were saying. In a school of 2,000 students, she hadn't thought her status as new girl would be so obvious. Huh. It sounded like Luke again. Next conquest, Chris said, punching Luke in the arm. Were they still talking about her? She's hot. Shut up, man. Chris made more kissy sounds. If you don't ask her out, I will. Brooke's fingers tightened around the book. They most definitely were talking about her, even if she did have to strain to hear. Don't acknowledge them. They're just guys being guys, and guys suck. Doesn't she get a say in the matter? Luke's voice had risen, although still a quiet whisper. She looks like the kind of girl who has better taste than you. So you do think she's hot? Shh, she's going to hear us. Yeah, okay, she's hot. Maybe she can be your next Beth. And maybe hell will freeze over too. Chapter 2. The new girl was beautiful, but not in the way most of the school's beach babes were. Her hair, long and brown with golden highlights, fell around her shoulders in soft curls. Her skin was fair, her nose and cheekbones dusted with freckles. And her eyes were gorgeous. The same light blue as the Oklahoma Thunder's basketball jerseys. Luke had seen her glancing over at them, knew she probably overheard some of their conversation. Awkward. Why did Chris have to be so loud? He gave Chris another fist bump. I'm going to go talk to her. Chris started up the kissing sounds again. Luke ignored him and slid into the desk next to the girls. Chris slid into the one on the other side of Luke, obviously wanting to overhear the conversation. Hey, Luke said. She barely glanced up from the novel she read. Hi. Her voice was flat and far from friendly. Chris would never let him live it down if she gave him the cold shoulder. Luke had a reputation to protect. He stuck out a hand. Luke Ryder. She reluctantly lowered her book and put her hand in his. Her skin was smooth, her shake quick and firm. "Brooke Pierce." "I noticed you from across the room." He flashed her a winning smile, the one girls always melted over. "You're new here, aren't you?" She didn't melt, just rolled her eyes. The bell rang then, signaling the start of class. Mrs. Chapman stood at the front of the room, waiting for the students to settle down. "Welcome to your first day of 11th grade honors English," she said. Luke settled back in his seat, glad for the interruption. It'd give him some time to figure out how to unthaw the Ice Queen. Mrs. Chapman walked around the room, placing a syllabus on each desk as she described the material they'd cover that semester. Then she actually made them read a short story aloud from their literature textbook and discuss the themes portrayed. On the first day of class! Luke fought back an eye roll. It was great to see his friends again, the ones he wasn't close enough with to bother keeping in touch over summer break, but the beginning of the school year was always such a drag. "Since we have a few minutes left before the bell, turn and introduce yourself to your neighbor. I expect a lot of class discussion, and I want everyone to get comfortable with each other." "Thank you, Mrs. Chapman." Luke couldn't hide his grin as he turned back to the new girl, Brooke. "So, where were we? Oh yeah, I remember. You're new." Brooke shifted in her chair, her fingers playing with the corner of her book. "Perceptive. Forgive me if I hold the applause." So the Ice Queen was sassy. Luke liked her more and more by the second. "Where are you from?" "Not far. I'm a transfer from Westview." Luke raised an eyebrow. Despite being in a different school district, Westview wasn't far from Canyon Crest, maybe a 10-minute drive. "Why the transfer?" Brooke sighed as though she didn't want to get into it. "My mom and I moved into the district. She thought it would be better in the long run if I transferred." "That's not a big move. Did you guys buy a new house or something?" "Or something," Brooke agreed. Man, but she was evasive. "Well, I'm a pretty nice guy. I could show you around, introduce you to some people, let you sit with my group at lunch." Brooke's eyes narrowed, and there was a storm inside their depths that he hadn't expected. "Thanks, but I don't hang out with guys looking for conquests." So she had overheard. Either she had super hearing or he wasn't great at whispering. "I'm going to kill Chris." Luke chuckled uncomfortably. Chris was being lame. "Whatever." Luke held up his hands. "Honest. Come on, give me a chance." The bell rang then. "See you tomorrow," Mrs. Chapman called in the background. Brooke slid her book into her backpack and stood. "Thanks for the offer, but I don't need friends like you two." "We were just kidding around," Luke called at her retreating back. Chris wrapped an arm around his neck. "She turned you down, huh?" He shook his head. "I hate to say I told you so." Luke shrugged off Chris's arm. "She just doesn't know me yet, but she will." "Maybe I'm more her type." Chris put a hand dramatically over his chest. "Sensitive, caring, attractive." Luke pushed him. "Arrogant." "Oh, so you're more her type?" "I just need to lay some groundwork." He couldn't let Chris win. "Don't take too long. She turned you down, which means she's up for grabs." Luke grinned. Things had just gotten interesting. Chapter 3. Brooke found a deserted corner in the commons during lunch. No one seemed to actually eat in the lunchroom except the ultra losers of the school, and hunkered down to hide. "I hate you, Dad." The phrase repeated over and over in her head as she ate lunch. "This is your fault." It wasn't like she wanted her parents to get back together. Once a cheater, always a cheater, and her mom deserved better than that. But why hadn't Dad tried to be good enough? Someone cleared her throat, and Brooke looked up. A girl grinned down at her, lunch tray balanced in one hand. "Can I sit here?" she asked. "Being the new girl is so inconvenient. I'm Zoe, by the way." "Brooke, I'm new too." "Glad I'm not the only one." Zoe sank onto the floor. "Excellent. Where do you hail from?" About 10 miles from here. I'm from Denver. Zoe flipped her hair over one shoulder. It was nearly black with violently pink streaks throughout. My dad had to get a frickin' promotion, so we moved. My junior year. Can you believe that? What year are you? Junior, and yeah, it sucks. At least the weather's beautiful. It was snowing when we left Denver last week. Just flurries, but still. It's nice to pull my shorts back out. Zoe pulled a piece off her roll and popped it in her mouth. 10 miles isn't far. Why'd you switch schools? My stupid dad. Oh, sounds like a good story. Zoe raised an eyebrow. Brooke was usually reluctant to tell people about her parents, but somehow she knew Zoe wouldn't give her false pity. He had an affair with Shandy, the dental hygienist. When Mom found out, we moved. Zoe winced. Ouch. Are your parents getting divorced? I don't know. Probably. Brooke dragged her fork through the ranch dressing on her plate. They're separated right now and they're going to counseling, but only because the courts are forcing them since they have to discuss custody of me. Mom wouldn't have made me switch schools if she was planning on getting back together with him. That's rough. Zoe blew out a breath, puffing the bangs off her forehead. My problems don't seem so bad now. Moving plus a separation definitely trumps moving, even if I did have to move farther. Already making friends, I see, a deep voice said. Brooke whipped her head around. Luke settled beside her on the floor with a grin. He ditched the letterman's jacket, and Brooke blinked in surprise. His shirt stretched across his chest, and the muscles there made him look much older than 17. You don't have to sit here, Luke said. I told you I'd save you a place. We're on the stairs over there. He pointed. And I believe I told you I'm not interested, Brooke said. Luke laughed as though she hadn't just turned him down. You're funny. I like that in a girl. Who's your friend? I'm Zoe, just moved from Colorado. Welcome, Luke said. Brooks knew too, but she doesn't seem interested in my offer to show her around the school. Maybe you can help me convince her otherwise. He stood. I'll see you around, Brooke. As soon as Luke was far enough away not to hear her, Zoe burst into giggles. What was that? Brooke sighed. He's in my English class. I think he's like the alpha male around here or something. I heard him telling his friend that I'd make a good conquest. Zoe laughed again, even louder than before. Oh, that's hilarious. Hilarious? Brooke made a face. It's insulting is what it is. Nah, I know guys like him. He's just kidding around. Go out a few times and he'll leave you alone. I don't want to go on a date with him. The confidence, the swagger, the ego, it all reminded her too much of the man her father had become. Ever since meeting Shandy, the dental hygienist, he'd reverted back to 16 years old. But he's hot. As if that was reason enough to date someone. Brooke rolled her eyes. After listening to my parents fight, I'm not interested in guys right now. Zoe shrugged. Suit yourself. What class do you have next? Gym in Building B. Hey, me too. Cool. We have a class together. They talked until the bell rang, then walked together toward class. Brooke quickly changed into her athletic clothes and then walked out onto the court. She let out an audible groan when she saw Luke and Chris dribbling a basketball near one of the hoops. Zoe came up behind Brooke. Luke's in this class too? Oh, this is going to be good. Yeah, I had the dubious pleasure of meeting the Neanderthal to his left in English this morning. Name? Chris. Hubba, hubba. Zoe smacked her lips. You attract all the hotties. I'm officially stuck to your side like glue. I think they're coming over here to talk. Why won't he leave me alone? Brooke moaned as the two boys approached. Hey, girls, Luke said, flashing them a brilliant smile. One he clearly thought would make Brooke go weak in the knees. She hated that it did, just a little. Chris, these are my girls Brooke and Zoe. They're both new. I'm not your girl, Brooke said. Nice to meet you, Chris said. Brooke could tell by the way he swept his hair out of his eyes that he was interested in Zoe, and by the way Zoe crossed her arms over her chest to create cleavage that Zoe was too. She also knew it wasn't going to work between them. Two loud personalities would never be happy together. The teacher blew a whistle, signaling the start of class. Everyone run 15 laps around the gym, then we'll go over the syllabus. Brooke jogged over to the side of the gym and ran along the perimeter. She picked out a couple who were obviously dating, and another that she knew would soon be together. It was obvious in the way the girl smiled while tossing her hair and the boy laughed. She shook her head and closed her eyes. Don't think about it. Why couldn't her special talent be singing or dancing or baton twirling? Anything but fixing people up and knowing when relationships wouldn't work out. It made the year leading up to her parents' separation excruciating. She focused on the pounding of her feet against the gym floor, the squeak of shoes and rapid breathing of those around her. She'd always enjoyed running. She had been on the track team at Westview. Maybe she should join the team here. It'd make her mom happy if she thought Brooke was settling in. I know a restaurant with fantastic food. Brooke glanced over and let out a groan. Luke ran pace beside her. Can't you leave me alone? A pretty girl like you? Never. I've been nothing but rude to you. Most guys would take the hint. That trademark grin spread across his face again. My daddy didn't raise no quitter. I like a challenge. She gritted her teeth and picked up her pace. Luke matched her stride for stride. I'm not trying to be a challenge, I'm just not interested, Brooke said. You don't even know me. Brooke rolled her eyes. Let me give you a tip, Luke. Consider it friendly advice. If you want a girl to go out with you, don't talk about conquering her 5 feet from where she's sitting. It tends to be a turnoff. And Chris tends to speak before thinking. I'm a nice guy, I swear. Don't listen to him. Brooke whipped her head to her other side. Chris ran beside her now as well. Luke's a total jerk, Chris continued. He goes through women like most guys go through boxes of pizza. It's me you want to go out with, and I won't just take you to some lame restaurant. Oh, you have something better in mind? Luke asked. Laser tag. This is getting ridiculous, Brooke said. You two are idiots. And why was Chris still hitting on her when he clearly liked Zoe? Pick me, Brooke, Luke called as he sprinted ahead of them. She heard Chris laugh. Brooke ran her final 3 laps around the gym, then slowed to a walk for a cool down. Zoe jogged to catch up, and Brooke slowed down even further. Somebody's gaining popularity really fast. It's just because I told him no. The man's probably never heard that word before in his life. Zoe drummed her fingers together like an evil villain. You shall enlighten him, grasshopper. Brooke laughed. You're a dork, you know that? Yeah, but that's why you like me and why we're going to be such great friends. Chapter 4. The girl was insufferable. For the last week, Luke had tried everything he could think of to get Brooke's attention. Concert tickets, chocolate bars slipped into her locker, flirty texts sent during class. Nothing had worked. Luke tapped his pencil against his math test, pretending to still work on it. No way would he be the first one to turn it in. He might love math and science, but his friends didn't need to know that. Why did he care whether or not Brooke went out with him? Was it because she was the only girl who'd ever turned him down? Really, she was kind of a jerk. Except she wasn't. Luke had watched her help classmates with homework, share her lunch with someone who forgot theirs, laugh with Zoe. She wasn't a jerk to everyone, just him. The girl could certainly hold a grudge. 3 students had turned in their tests now. It was probably safe. Luke turned his in, and the second the bell rang, he bolted to the lunchroom. He quickly got his meal and found Chris on the steps. Luke stared at Brooke. She sat across the commons with Zoe near the giant statue of the school mascot. Their heads were close together as they giggled. I have to get her to go out with me. Luke said. Give it up, man. It's not happening. Me, on the other hand, I'm making progress. Chris smirked. Luke flushed. Why do you even care? I thought you liked Zoe. You two flirt like a frickin' basketball flirts with a hoop. Yeah, Zoe's into me. I'm keeping her as my backup for now. But I might not need her. Yesterday, Brooke let me hold her books when I walked her to class. Luke ripped open the bag of chips on his lunch tray and chomped on one angrily. You're making that up, trying to get under my skin so I lose focus and you can swoop in. He had to get Brooke to date him now. No way would he let Chris, Mr. I like to keep girls as backups, win. You don't believe me, huh? Chris rose. I'll go over there and talk to Brooke right now just to prove it to you. Luke scoffed. That proves nothing. If I can get her to laugh, you owe me a candy bar. Luke held out his hand and shook on it. Deal. This was one bet he would definitely win. Chris popped the collar on his jacket and strutted over to Brooke and Zoe. Luke covered his mouth as a laugh, along with a few chip crumbs, sputtered out of him. Chris looked like a peacock with all that preening. Chris leaned against the raven statue, crossing one foot over the other. Zoe was already laughing, but Luke saw the disapproval on Brooke's face even from here. He's not getting out of this bet. I'm getting the most expensive candy bar in the vending machine. Wait, was that a smile on Brooke's face? Luke leaned forward as though a few extra inches would help bring the image into focus. Yes, that was definitely a smile. Why, that dirty, rotten, no good. A laugh! Brooke threw her head back and laughed. Chris said something else, and Brooke rose and gave him a hug. Chris turned and strutted back to the stairs, a gigantic smile on his face. What did you do? Luke asked. Like I'd share my secrets with you. Seriously, man, did you pay her to laugh or something? Chris scowled. Course not. I play my bets fair. Now pay up. Luke growled. He stomped into the hallway and fished out a $5 bill, bought a Snickers from the vending machine, and headed back to Chris. Thank you, Chris said as Luke slid it across the table. Did you tell her a joke? No, she just likes me best. Seriously, what did you do? I told her you'd owe me a candy bar if she laughed. Easy peasy. Luke growled. This means war. He stewed all through lunch, trying to figure out how to get Chris back. How to prove to Brooke that Chris wasn't the one she wanted to date. He was. He watched as a girl with Down syndrome sat down next to Brooke. Brooke gave the girl a big hug, then handed her a cookie. The girl grinned and took it. Stupid bet. He wanted Brooke to show him that side of her. The bell rang and he and Chris headed to PE. In class, Coach split them into teams for basketball. Luke felt a jolt of excitement when Brooke was assigned to his team and Chris ended up on the opposing one. Here's my chance. If talking wasn't doing the trick, maybe showing Brooke he was far superior physically would. He would kick Chris's butt during this game. As soon as Coach blew the whistle, Luke ran to guard Chris. The ball passed toward Chris and Luke hit the ball out of his hands and took off down the court. Chris swore and followed after him. Luke threw the basketball into the hoop and, "Score!" Luke yelled. He did a victory dance, then glanced over to see if Brooke had noticed. She stood in a corner talking to Zoe, her fingers playing with a lock of hair that fell over her shoulder. It's not going to work, Chris whispered as he passed Luke. Shut up. As the game continued, things got more and more aggressive. Foul, the coach yelled, running toward them. One more move like that and you two are running laps for the rest of class. He looked back and forth between them. Understand? Yes, coach, they both mumbled. Someone threw the ball into play and Chris ran down the court with it. Luke charged after him. Chris jumped up and tossed the ball. Luke tried to grab it but couldn't quite reach. He slammed into Chris and the two went down. The coach's whistle went wild. Luke scrambled off Chris. You okay, man? he asked. Chris groaned, holding a hand to his nose. Blood seeped between his fingers and dripped down his shirt. "Ouch," he said, his voice muffled and nasal-sounding. "Crap." Luke reached out a hand and helped Chris stand. "I said cool down," the coach said. "Are you okay, Chris?" Chris gingerly felt his nose. "Yeah." "Get yourself cleaned up," Coach said. He pointed a finger at Luke. "And you start running laps." Luke hung his head and obediently took off running. "Did he do that on purpose?" he heard Brooke ask Zoe as he ran by them. "I think he was trying to impress you," Zoe said. Luke ran harder, pushing himself to get within hearing distance of Brooke and Zoe again. "Makes no sense. How is injuring his best friend supposed to impress me?" Brooke asked. "I think it's—" Luke shook his head and cursed. So Brooke didn't find athleticism sexy after all. At least, not when it got someone else hurt. Strike 2. Chapter 5. How was school today? Brooke clicked her seatbelt into place. Fine. Her mom glanced at her as she pulled out of the parking lot. Anything interesting happen? Brooke supposed that was a good word to describe gym class. Some guy body slammed his friend during a basketball game in PE to try and impress me. Brooke rolled her eyes. She would never understand boys. Obviously, it didn't work. Her mom frowned. Is this that Luke boy you keep telling me about? Yeah, but it wasn't like she had talked about him that much. I don't like the sound of him. He seems like a player. Is he handsome? Is the sky blue? Is the earth round? He was too handsome for his own good. Brooke propped her feet up on the dashboard and fiddled with the radio. I don't see what that has to do with anything. Attractive men have wandering eyes. Heaven knows your father is handsome as sin, and look where that's got us. He's shacking up with a 20-year-old whore while we try to live off my paycheck and whatever he decides to toss our way. They're not living together, Brooke said. Although she suspected Shandy was there more often than she was at her own apartment, despite the fact her parents were supposedly trying to work things out. You don't have to worry about me, Mom. I'm not interested in Luke. And he's only interested in me because I'm the first girl to tell him no. Brooke tapped her hand against her leg in time to the beat of the music. Drop it, Mom. Since discovering the affair, her mom had been on a one-woman mission to warn Brooke of all the pitfalls of men. Men do like the chase. Maybe if I had made your father chase me a little more, he wouldn't be living in a beachside condo with Miss Fake Boobs. Speaking of your father, he called today. Brooke's hand stilled. What did he want? To see you. He wants to explain. Brooke violently shook her head. No way. He's used up all his chances. Her father had tried to get together with her a few times since they had moved out of the house that held so many happy memories. But he always showed up late or canceled at the last moment. He wasn't dependable anymore, and she was sick of feeling like she was an inconvenience. Brooklyn, her mother sighed, pulling into the carport of the apartment. They got out of the car and Brooke trailed her mom up the stairs. I know your father and I aren't exactly on the best terms right now, but you don't have to side with me. Our therapist seems to think I'm forcing you to pick sides and that it may give you an unhealthy perception of men and damage your future relationships. She rolled her eyes as though the whole thing were silly. Sometimes I wonder why we pay that woman $300 an hour if all she's going to tell us is ridiculous crap like that. But it did get me thinking, and you should at least talk to your father. I know he can't undo the mistakes he's made, but as much as I hate it, he's still your dad and should continue to be in your life. Brooke closed her eyes, wishing the hurt in her heart would disappear. What did he have in mind? He wants to meet up at the Denny's by the high school after class tomorrow. Just a nice father-daughter date. He'll drop you off here when you're done. I don't know, Mom. Brooke followed her mother inside the apartment and tossed her backpack onto the kitchen table. I don't think I can forgive him for what he did. Mom cupped Brooke's cheek with her hand. Just because I loathe the man doesn't mean you have to. If you suddenly don't like something he says or does, call me and I'll rush right down to pick you up. What if he cancels again? Then I will personally wring his neck. Brooke let out a slow breath. Okay. Want me to call and let him know you're coming? Yes. But Brooke shook her head. She didn't want to be the reason for more yelling. No, I'll do it. She pulled her backpack off the counter and headed toward her room. I've got homework to do. In her bedroom, Brooke plopped onto her desk chair and pulled out her phone. She clicked the message icon and entered her father's number. I'll meet you at Denny's tomorrow after school. She pushed send. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed with a reply. Thank you, Sugarbee. Can't wait to see you. Brooke texted back, her thumbs flying over the screen. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Mom. I'll take what I can get. Brooke sighed and dropped her phone onto the desk. Don't flake on me, Dad, she whispered. He used to be so dependable, so kind. But everything had changed since Shandy. He'd done a complete 180, and now she wondered if she'd ever known him at all. Worrying about tomorrow wouldn't do any good, she decided. Better to get ahead on some homework and put the whole thing out of her mind. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Chapter 6. Where is he? Brooke glanced around the strip mall parking lot, hoping Dad would drive up in his convertible. For 45 minutes, she'd sat on a bench outside Denny's, backpack at her feet and phone clutched in her hand, smiling senselessly at people who walked into and out of the other businesses in the strip mall. But sitting on a bench outside of Denny's was less humiliating than sitting alone at a booth inside the restaurant. Brooke brought her cell phone screen to life, but Dad still hadn't answered any of her 16 texts. A tiny part of her worried something was wrong. Usually he at least had the decency to let her know he wasn't coming. But no, he was just being inconsiderate. He was probably busy with Shandy and had lost track of time. Tears stung Brooke's eyes. I'm a fool. She wondered what his excuse would be for not coming. Shandy had a bad reaction to self-tanner? Maybe he'd tell Brooke something came up at work and leave it at that. Brooke ran her thumb across the phone screen. I should call Mom to come pick me up. But she couldn't make herself do it. She was mad at her father, furious even. But listening to her mom rant about his failures would only make the hurt that much worse. Mom would be livid he had bailed on Brooke. Again. Brooke glanced across the strip mall parking lot to the Walmart. Maybe she would aimlessly wander the aisles for another hour, then call her mom to pick her up. She could lie and say Dad came and things went great, but an emergency called him away before he could take her home. But no, Mom would see through that immediately. Brooke had always been an awful liar. Brooke pulled her backpack toward her and dragged out her math textbook. She would wait another 30 minutes just in case he showed. Might as well do some homework in the meantime. A few customers walked out of Denny's and gave her a curious look as they passed. She had been there when they had arrived nearly an hour ago. Brooke dipped her head, focusing on the equations in the book. The wind fluttered the pages. Maybe Dad will still come. Maybe he really did have an emergency root canal to perform. Even still, he could have let her know. Tears pooled in Brooke's eyes and she blinked quickly, pushing a few down her cheeks. This is so stupid. If I'm not worth his time, then he's not worth mine. But try as she might to convince herself otherwise, it hurt that her father no longer cared. About Brooke, about Mom. He hadn't cared enough to fire Shandy and keep their family intact. Brooke? Brooke's hand froze on the textbook, holding the pages flat as the wind rustled them. For a moment, she thought it was her father. But no, the voice wasn't quite low enough. She quickly brushed her cheeks and looked up. Hi, Luke. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same. He motioned to the shoe store next door. I'm dropping off some equipment for my dad. He held up a bag. They need their security panel replaced. Oh, Brilliant response. I didn't know your dad had his own business. Yeah, Ryder Communications. We do everything from security systems to automatic flushing toilets. I work for him after school. Nice. He pushed his hands into his pockets. Is everything okay? You look like you've been crying or something. It's allergies. Right. He motioned to the store. Well, I'm gonna install a new panel. Okay. Brooke's cheeks burned as Luke walked away. Why did he have to show up at the exact moment she sat crying on a bench? She rolled her shoulders back. Well, there was nothing she could do about it now. She tried to concentrate on her math homework but couldn't focus. 15 minutes later, Luke returned, the old security panel in his hands. This time, he sat down on the bench next to her. Are you meeting someone? Not anymore. Brooke closed her book with a sigh. Luke clearly wasn't letting this go. Now he would make some snarky comment about how a perceived date had stood her up, and that's what she got for being so cold. But he didn't say any of that. Instead, he stared at her, his eyes full of concern. What happened? Brooke bit her lip, focusing on forcing the tears back. My dad wanted to meet, but I guess something came up. Oh. He was quiet for a minute. Where do you think he is? Probably with his new girlfriend, Shandy, the dental hygienist. Wow, that sucks. I'm really sorry. He motioned to Denny's. How about I buy you something to eat? Brooke raised an eyebrow. If you're trying to trick me into a date, it's not nice to play dirty when a girl's having a hard day. Luke held up his hands defensively. No strings attached, promise. Brooke thought about saying no, but the larger-than-life poster of peanut butter and chocolate pancakes in the restaurant window had haunted her for an hour. You better not be lying to me, Ryder. I'm just trying to help a friend out. Usually I pick friends who are less annoying. But Brooke smiled to soften the blow, and Luke laughed. I've seen you around school, Brooke Pierce. I know you're a nice girl. The Ice Queen act isn't fooling me. Come on, I'm hungry. Okay, but I'm paying for myself. Inside the restaurant, the smell of frying bacon and maple syrup had Brooke's mouth watering. She inhaled deeply and her stomach grumbled. Luke chuckled. Sounds like I'm not the only one who's hungry. Even ice queens need to eat, Brooke teased. The hostess seated them and they quickly placed their orders. Want to tell me about it? Luke asked. Brooke thought about refusing, but what would it hurt to share? She shrugged. It's why we moved. At the beginning of summer, Mom found out about the affair. She moved us to a hotel the next day until we could find an apartment. Now they can barely say 2 civilized words to each other, and my dad's so busy acting like he's 16 again that he doesn't have time to be a parent. I'm really sorry. I can't imagine what that must be like. Brooke opened her mouth to reply, but wasn't sure what to say to him. This concerned, kind, likable version of Luke had her on edge. I keep waiting for you to say something jerky, but you're being really nice. Luke shrugged. See, I'm not such a bad guy after all. Their food arrived and Brooke dug in. She closed her eyes in pure joy as the peanut butter and chocolate coated her tongue in a perfect harmony of sweet and savory. That's good, she said, pointing her fork at the food. Luke grinned, digging into his skillet. Yeah. Are your parents still together? Brooke asked. Yep, for like 20 years or something. Are they happy? They seem to be. I thought my parents were happy too. They embodied the happily ever after, you know? When I was a little girl, I was convinced their lives were a fairy tale. It's why I wanted to be a matchmaker, to help other people find as much happiness as them. You mean like a Fiddler on the Roof, real live matchmaker? Brooke nodded. There's a matchmaking firm in Los Angeles. When I graduate, I'm going to work there. Luke raised an eyebrow. You're serious about this? Love isn't something to mess around with. Brooke blushed, realizing how intimate that sounded. My parents had true love. I know they did. And then a year ago, my dad started acting strange. I knew something was up, although I wasn't positive what. My dad threw happily ever after away for someone young enough to be his daughter. Are your parents going to try and make it work? They're going to counseling, but only because California law requires it if you have custody issues. Shandy still works at his office, so obviously he isn't too committed to fixing things. I'm pretty sure he's seen her behind Mom's back, even though he says he isn't. Sometimes I'll hear her voice in the background when he calls, or see lipstick smudges on his cheek. Things don't look good for my parents. Luke leaned back in the booth, dropping his fork onto the table. Well, I feel like a jerk. Brooke raised an eyebrow. Why? I've been chasing you while you've got all this crap going on at home. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm really sorry. I seriously had no idea. I thought you were playing hard to get. Well, I'm not. I just don't have a high opinion of guys right now. Can we start over? As friends, I mean? Brooke folded her arms. It sounded like a ploy. No strings attached? Some strings. Usually friends hang out and stuff. You tell me your problems, I tell you mine. That's how friendship works. Interesting proposition, but I'm not sure I believe you. He grinned. Give me a trial run and I'll convince you. She finally nodded. Okay, convince me. Brooke surprised herself by thoroughly enjoying the rest of the meal. It turned out that when Luke wasn't trying so hard, he was actually a pretty cool guy. They each paid for their meals and she followed him outside. She didn't notice her dad until it was too late. He climbed out of his convertible, fingers hovering over his cell phone. Brooke, he said, his shoulders sagging in relief. His hair was mussed and his green scrubs were wrinkled. I was just about to call you. I thought you'd left. You're late, Brooke said. She pulled out her phone. Almost an hour and a half late. I know, Sugarbee. I'm so sorry. Someone needed an emergency crown. And you couldn't have asked one of your assistants to send me a quick text? I didn't think about it. I lost track of time. Brooke brushed past him. I don't want to hear it. It's the truth. Brooke snorted. Yeah, Dad, I'm sure it is. Please, his eyes begged. Let's go inside and talk. We can still have dinner. Thanks, but I already ate. Luke is going to take me home. Her dad eyed Luke up and down, then frowned in disapproval. I'm sure he's got other things to do. I can drive you. Bye, Dad. Brooke, please. Then more quietly. Don't tell your mother about this, okay? No promises. Luke hurried to unlock his car door for Brooke, and she climbed inside. Brooke knew she wouldn't tell her mom about what had happened, not because of her dad, but because she was sick of seeing Mom hurt. Sorry about that, Brooke said when Luke climbed inside. Why? I should be telling you sorry. What a jerk. Brooke faced the window, hiding her smile. She felt like she should be embarrassed about what had happened, but she wasn't. She didn't care that Luke knew how messed up her family was. In fact, she sort of liked it. It was nice to have someone to help share the burden. Chapter 7. Luke felt like the world's biggest jerk. He couldn't believe he had been chasing Brooke around school for 2 weeks like she was some sort of trophy when she had been dealing with so much. No wonder she doesn't want to date, Luke thought as he drove home after dropping her off. She probably thinks all men are scum, and I haven't done much to convince her otherwise. It also explained a lot about why she had been the Ice Queen to him and Mother Teresa to everyone else. He needed to redeem himself, prove to Brooke that he was a good guy. He felt this strange urge to protect her from jerks. He wanted to get to know the nice girl she showed to everyone else at school, the girl he had had dinner with today. He was going to become the best friend Brooke had ever had, or at least try to be. He'd never been just friends with a girl, and honestly, he wasn't sure how to go about it. No one was going to hurt her, not if he could help it. It took a long time for Luke to fall asleep that night, and he was up the next morning before his alarm clock. He quickly got ready for the day and bounded down the stairs to the kitchen. "You're up early," his mom said. "I didn't expect you for at least another half hour." His dad looked up from the newspaper he read at the kitchen table. "In a hurry?" Luke shrugged. "I wanted to meet up with a friend before school." He hoped Brooke would be there extra early so they could talk before their first period class. She seemed like the type who would be early to everything. "Who's the friend?" Mom asked. Luke grabbed a piece of toast from off the plate on the counter. "Someone new to the school," he said, carefully avoiding the use of any gender pronouns. "I haven't heard about any new friends," Dad said. "We'd love to meet him. Why don't you bring him over after school sometime this week?" Luke blinked. "You'll be home?" Dad grinned. "I think I can take off a few hours early to meet one of your friends." Luke grinned too. As a small business owner, his dad spent long days at the office. "I'll see if she's interested." He grabbed another piece of toast off the plate and headed to the door. Maybe they hadn't noticed it slip. "Wait," his mom said. Luke sighed, slowly turning around. "This is a girl?" "Yeah, so?" "As in a girlfriend?" "As in a friend that is a girl. But not a girlfriend," his dad clarified. "No, not a girlfriend," Luke said. His mom folded her arms. "Well, I'll be darned. I didn't expect pigs to fly today." "If this is a girl, I'll definitely be home early to meet her," Dad said. He took a final sip of his coffee and rose. "I'll walk you out, Luke. I need to get to the office." Luke nodded. Dad gave Mom a kiss, and Luke gave her a quick hug, and they left. "You must really like this girl if you're not dating her," Dad said. He opened his car door and set his briefcase inside. Luke shrugged uncomfortably. "She's going through a hard time and needs a friend." "Ah." Dad raised an eyebrow. "That's admirable. See that you keep it at friendship." His eyes locked with Luke's. "Real men don't take advantage of women who are feeling vulnerable and going through a hard time. Understand?" Luke swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good. I love you. Have a good day." Luke waited for his dad to pull out of the garage, then got into his own car and headed to school. He knew his dad was right. Going after Brooke was totally out of the question. He'd decided as much last night. But he had never tried to consciously not date a girl. It might be harder to do than he thought. Luke arrived at the high school 30 minutes before the first bell. The halls were eerily empty. He usually slid into his desk seconds before the tardy bell, when the school was full to bursting. Luke wandered around the hallways for a few minutes, but found no sign of Brooke anywhere. Maybe she didn't get to school as early as he thought. That was okay, though. It'd give him a chance to get ahead on homework. Luke decided to go to the library. Most people avoided it, so he wasn't likely to be caught being a good student. If Chris found out, he'd laugh Luke out of the building. He cautiously walked through the library doors. The room was tomb quiet, and he glanced nervously around. Libraries always made him feel like he was a second away from being yelled at. He scanned the room, but only saw one girl at a round table. He did a double take. Was that Brooke? The hair, pulled back into a ponytail cascading down her back, was the same chestnut brown as hers. He walked toward her. She glanced up, and he grinned. Definitely Brooke. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Luke started to sit down next to her, then thought better of it and picked the seat across from her. Just friends, he reminded himself. It'd be harder to turn his flirt off than he'd anticipated. "I thought I'd come by early and do some homework." She frowned as though concerned. "I hope I didn't keep you from it last night." "No." He glanced around, then leaned forward and lowered his voice. "I've got everything done for today. I'm working ahead." Brooke stared at him, then burst out laughing. "Shh, you're going to get us in trouble. Mrs. Toon is a sweetheart and she loves me. No way she'll kick us out. Besides, we're the only ones here. Are you actually embarrassed to be doing homework? Luke ran a hand through his hair. Maybe a little. Why? I don't know. I'm not supposed to like school or be good at it. Why? Did girls always ask so many questions? He was usually too busy kissing them to let them talk. Chris would never let me live it down. Then Chris is a jerk. If you're good at school, own it. What subjects do you like? This is what friends do, share their likes and dislikes. Be honest. Math and science, and computers. My mom used to be an elementary school teacher, so my parents really encouraged me in school. And my dad has the communications company. He said he'll make me a partner when I graduate from college. Brooke's eyes widened. Wow, you are smart. What did you say the company does? Luke fought the urge to blush. A hodgepodge of everything. Telephones for the deaf, home security systems, automatic kitchen faucets, things like that. Luke, that's great. Brooke leaned forward. Luke resisted leaning forward as well, maybe taking her hand in his across the table. You know, a guy who owns his intelligence is a lot sexier than one who plays dumb. Really? Luke asked. Really. Now, if you're so great at math, can you help me with this problem? I'm much better with words than with numbers. English is more my subject. Luke scooted his chair next to Brooke's, figuring it was okay if it was for homework. And for the next 20 minutes, he helped her with advanced algebra. When the 5-minute warning bell rang, they packed up their belongings. Thanks for helping me, Brooke said as they walked toward English. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Luke looked away. It would have taken me hours to get that much done on my own. No problem. A hand clapped his shoulder. Dude, did I see you come out of the library? Luke's shoulders tensed, but he remembered what Brooke had said about owning his intelligence. Yeah, so what? Chris laughed, walking alongside him. What the heck were you doing in there? He was helping me with my math homework, Brooke said. Luke winced. He didn't want to own his intelligence that much. Wow, I didn't know you could do math, Chris said in mock astonishment. He's really good at it, Brooke said. It wasn't a big deal, Luke said. They all slid into their desks. Chris leaned over to Luke and whispered so Brooke wouldn't hear. Helping the girl with homework? That's a dirty trick. I'm done with that, Luke whispered back. She doesn't need us chasing her like she's a Super Bowl championship ring. Chris frowned. What's going on with you, man? Are you two like friends now or something? Yeah. Now that is the slickest move of all. Lay off, Chris. I'm asking you as a friend. She's off limits. Nothing is off limits, Ryder, especially not her. Chapter 8. Over the next few weeks, life fell into a comfortable rhythm for Brooke. She and Luke were friendly to each other, if not exactly friends outside of school hours. He continued to flirt, but had toned it down significantly. She was learning that he just had a flirtatious personality. She hated what it did to her. The butterflies, the sweaty palms, the racing heart. What was that about, anyway? Sure, Luke was good-looking, and it turned out he was pretty nice too, but now wasn't the time to be attracted to someone. Luke seemed to have kept the secret of her parents' impending divorce, and he was no longer tormenting her, so Brooke decided to be satisfied with that and push all the other feelings away. As for her parents, there had been less shouted phone conversations as of late. Brooke didn't know if that meant therapy was working or if it meant they were running out of things to yell about. She wasn't sure which she wanted. On the one hand, a broken family was far from ideal. On the other hand, she didn't know if she could ever trust her father again. He'd continuously apologized for ditching her at Denny's. Brooke didn't believe his emergency crown excuse, But she didn't want to get into it with him either, so she let it go. He'd tried to get together with her again a few times in the weeks since, but she kept dodging his attempts. Halloween dawned unusually warm, even for San Diego. As Brooke walked into the school in her jeans and t-shirt, her eyes were assaulted by miniskirts and cat ears. Brooke rolled her eyes and pushed past a gaggle of slutty nurses to her locker. "Not your holiday, huh?" Brooke looked up. Luke leaned casually against the lockers. He wore tight jeans, cuffed at the ankles, and a white t-shirt that stretched tight across his chest. His hair was heavily gelled. Brooke's cheeks heated, and she looked away. "What are you supposed to be?" she asked. Luke drew back as though offended. "I'm obviously Danny, from the movie Grease." He pulled out a comb from his back pocket and ran it through his hair dramatically. Brooke's heart flipped. "Too warm for the leather jacket right now." Brooke laughed. She couldn't help it. "Right. How did I not catch that?" Zoe bounded up next to them. "Does that make Brooke your Sandy?" Luke grinned. "Only if she wants to be." "I do. Oh, I do. Thanks, but dressing up isn't really my thing." "Come on, it's fun." Zoe wore fishnet stockings, a miniskirt, and a tight corset that bordered on not dress code approved. Her hair was pulled back in typical pinup girl style, slicked into place with curls on each side of her face. She looked gorgeous and sexy all at once. Guys were tripping all over themselves, but Luke's eyes hadn't lingered on her. Why? Zoe was exactly the kind of girl Brooke imagined Luke would go for, yet he'd never made a move. Brooke pulled her books out of her locker and shut it. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourselves." Luke fell into step beside them as they walked toward class. "There's a Halloween party tonight," he said, "at Chris's. His parents are loaded, so there'll be lots of good food. You coming?" "Of course we're coming." Zoe linked her arm through Brooke's. "Someone's got to show her the reason for the season." "That's Christmas," Brooke said. "And you're boring," Zoe said. "What time?" "Starts at 8. I'll text you directions," Luke said. "Don't I get a say in this?" Brooke asked. An arm slid around her shoulder. "Chris." Brooke quickly shook him off. "Saying what?" Chris asked. "We're trying to get Brooke to come to your party," Luke said. Chris grinned. "Excellent." "We're going, Brooke. End of story." Zoe waved and veered off down the hallway toward her first class. Brooke stewed about the party all day. It wasn't just that she wasn't a fan of parties. She also wasn't a fan of being told what to do. She didn't like to give up control. Enough of my choices have been taken away from me lately. Brooke turned into the apartment complex after school, her mind still consumed with the party. Maybe she could fake a headache. She pulled into her usual parking space and got out of the car. That's when she saw him. She froze and dropped the car keys to the blacktop in surprise. He leaned against his silver Mercedes, obviously waiting for her. She quickly scooped up her keys. Her dad walked across the parking lot toward her. Why is he here? What does he want? She wanted to simultaneously run into his arms and scream at him to go away. He'd obviously changed after work, since he wore Dockers and a polo shirt instead of his typical green scrubs. His graying hair was slicked back like he was going somewhere important. He held out his arms, and Brooke couldn't stop herself from walking into them. He folded her into his embrace, and she squeezed her eyes shut, willing the clock to rewind time. He smelled like peppermint and fluoride treatments, just like always. She wanted so badly to view him as dad again, and not as the person who had ruined their family. It doesn't have to be this way, she thought as he kissed the top of her head. He made a mistake, but we all make mistakes. I don't have to keep pushing him away. He pulled back. Mind if we take a walk? I've already spoken with your mother, so she knows where you are. Okay, Brooke said. Her dad took the backpack from her shoulder. Unlock the trunk and we'll leave this here. I can run it up to the apartment real quick. He took the keys from her hand. This is quicker. Brooke shrugged. After he handed her back the keys, she motioned to the concrete path around the apartments and they started walking. Trees lined the trail, shading it and dropping their leaves so that Brooke's footsteps crunched. You look good, her dad said. Your hair's grown. I noticed that at Denny's. Yeah, a lot can happen in 5 months. He sighed, running a hand through his own hair. Communication goes both ways, Sugar Bee. It's not for lack of me trying. I'd be more willing to communicate if you weren't so flaky. I guess I deserve that. Dad cleared his throat. I'm sorry. I'll be better. Your mom said school's going well and you've made new friends. Yeah, I guess. Brooke peered up at her dad. How are things with you and Mom? It's been quieter lately. He sighed. That's actually what I'm here to talk to you about. He motioned to a bench along the trail and they sat down. Brooke, your mother and I aren't getting back together. We're filing the divorce papers as soon as we can get all the particulars ironed out. Brooke sucked in a breath and blinked rapidly. She'd known it was coming, but she hadn't realized how much the finality would sting. She leaned forward, staring at her toes and trying to breathe evenly. Brooke? She felt his hand on her back, concerned and comforting. She rose. What happened? Her dad looked away. Shandy's pregnant. She told me a few weeks ago. I knew your mother would never take me back now. I've done a lot of soul searching, and I feel like I owe it to the baby to give Shandy and me a shot. Fire ignited in Brooke's chest. Mom shouldn't take you back after that. How far along is Shandy, Dad? Brooke, how far? He looked away. About 2 months. The fist tightened around her heart. She hated having her suspicions confirmed. I will never forgive him for this. So while you and Mom have been going to counseling and remediation, you've still been sleeping with Shandy? He stood. Sugar Bee, can we please? Don't call me that! She held up a hand and backed away. I can't believe you would do this to Mom. To me. Shandy's young enough to be your daughter. It's disgusting. He held up both hands. I don't know what you want me to say. It's not just Mom you're going to lose then. It's me. She turned her back and walked away. He grabbed her arm, but she shrugged him off. You made your choice, Dad. These are the consequences. Brooke. His voice broke, but she ignored him and started running. He didn't try to follow her, and Brooke wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or hurt. She ran 3 miles until the tree-lined sidewalk covered in leaves turned into sand. Waves rippled across the water, calm and frustratingly at odds with how she felt inside. Where was a good storm when she needed one? Brooke's feet shifted on the uneven surface, her shoes filling with sand, but she didn't care. She kept running. Shandy, the 20-year-old homewrecker, pregnant. A half-sibling. Would it be a boy or a girl? Brooke pushed herself harder. Her ankle twisted in the sand and she barely stopped herself from falling. Did she even want to get to know the baby? Did she want to have a sibling who was only half her blood and relation? Her phone buzzed and she slowed to a jog, panting. Are you okay? It was from Mom. Brooke quickly texted back. I don't want to talk about it. I'll be home late. She couldn't handle her mom's pain when her own was so raw. Brooke continued to decrease her pace until she was at a slow walk. She watched the waves crash into the beach, let the roar fill her ears until it felt like the scream she wouldn't let escape. Seagulls squawked near a family of 3 munching on hot dogs. That's not us anymore, Brooke realized. It was no longer the 3 of them. Now it was her and Mom on one side, and Dad, Shandy, and Baby on the other. Did she want to be part of that other equation? Her phone buzzed. Brooke swiped her finger across the screen, expecting a demand from her mom to return home. Instead, it was Zoe. "You are not getting out of this party. Where are you?" Brooke glanced at the time. 7:07. She couldn't believe it was that late. She had left her dad, 2 hours ago? 3? She'd fully intended on blowing off Zoe, Luke, and the party. But suddenly, Brooke wanted to be around people. She wanted to laugh and dance and forget about stupid Shandy and stupid Dad. "At the city beach," Brooke quickly replied. "Can you pick me up?" She texted a few landmarks to help Zoe know where she was near, then turned and headed towards the street. "Be there soon." Brooke stuck her phone in her pocket and found a bench to wait on. Children in Halloween costumes filled the streets as they trick-or-treated from store to store, collecting candy from smiling employees while adoring parents watched. In a few years, that would be Brooke's little sister, or maybe a little brother. Would she go with her dad and Shandy when they took the child trick-or-treating, or would she still be bitter and insist on staying home? A car pulled up to the curb and Zoe waved. Brooke pushed herself up from the bench and climbed into the passenger side. A car honked at them for stopping in the middle of the parking lot, and Zoe quickly drove off. "What were you doing at the beach?" Zoe asked. She flicked a glance at Brooke. "You're wearing that to the party?" Brooke shrugged. "I was running." "In jeans? Hey, is everything okay?" "Yeah." Brooke forced a smile. "Just excited to party." "Well, you can't go like that. We'll stop at my house first. You seriously need a costume." "Sounds great. I really need to be someone else tonight." Chapter 9. Chris's home rivaled a haunted house for Halloween spirit. Luke walked past tombstones and skeletons rising out of coffins in the front yard. Strobe lights created shadows in the windows and ghoulish music played outside. He didn't knock, just opened the front door. Music thrummed through the wood floor, not the ghoulish stuff, but real top 40 tunes, and made his bones vibrate. "Hey, Luke." One of the cheerleaders sidled up to him and wrapped her arms around his neck in a tight hug, pressing herself against him. He could only assume from her skimpy costume that she was dressed as a pole dancer. Or maybe a stripper mid-act. "Hey, Tammy." Luke disentangled himself from her embrace. Normally he would have hugged her back, maybe even encouraged her, but he was worried Brooke would show up and think they were a couple or something. "Have you seen Chris?" "In the kitchen." "Thanks." Luke pushed through the crowd of costumed teenagers. The kitchen counter overflowed with food, and a large black cauldron spewed smoke. Probably root beer. Chris's parents were cool, but not stupid enough to serve alcohol to minors. They made themselves scarce at these events, but still seemed to know everything that went on. "Hey, man, or should I call you Danny?" Chris cackled, and the two bumped fists. "Great party," Luke said. "I think even more people are here than last year." "Yeah. Speaking of people, have you seen Brooke?" Luke scanned the crowd again, but no way would Brooke show up dressed like any of these people. Chris raised an eyebrow. "Still trying, huh? You should give it up and admit defeat. She's into me, and you know it." Luke snorted. "If by into you mean can't stand you. She's coming to my party, isn't she?" "Even if she does show up, a pretty big if, who's to say she's here because of you?" "Boys, boys," Zoe said. Luke and Chris both turned. Zoe and Brooke stood in the doorway. In the absence of the school dress code, Zoe had changed into a midriff-bearing shirt and shorter mini that fit the more traditional pinup girl look. Brooke was dressed as a doctor, and not even a slutty one. Not that Luke was surprised. Baggy green scrub top, an oversized white doctor coat, a white surgical mask hanging around her neck. "Let me guess. A surgeon," Luke said. Brooke crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "Zoe said I had to dress up, and I wouldn't wear any of her costumes, so we had to raid her mom's closet. She's an obstetrician." Luke scratched his head. "A what?" Zoe giggled. "You know, a baby doctor. A doctor who deals with, girl issues." Luke reddened. Right. I don't think we'll need anyone to deliver a baby tonight. Haha, aren't you hilarious, Brooke said. Someone bumped into her, causing the whole group to shift forward as the crowd swarmed around them. Brooke, you promised to have fun tonight, remember? Zoe said. Right. Brooke unfolded her arms and rolled her neck from side to side. I'm ready to have fun. Where's the booze? Luke's eyes widened. Was she serious? Brooke laughed at his expression. I'm joking. Sort of. Okay, something had definitely happened. This wasn't typical Brooke behavior. Allow me to show you the fun. This way, ladies. Chris took Brooke and Zoe by the arm and they disappeared into the crowd. Luke followed them from the kitchen. Almost immediately, someone asked Brooke to dance. He tried to keep track of her, but it wasn't easy. He caught her flirting with a senior, then saw her slow dance with a different guy. Luke sipped his root beer and glared. The way she tossed her head back to laugh, smiled too widely, danced suggestively. It wasn't Brooke. What the heck was going on? What are you doing, sitting here like a wallflower? Tammy stood uncomfortably close, her arm brushing his. Come on, let's dance. Can't, Luke said, his eyes still glued to Brooke. Tammy followed his gaze, then sighed loudly. You need to stop obsessing. So she said no. There are lots of other girls who will say yes. She squeezed his bicep. Oh, I love this song. Luke allowed her to drag him onto the dance floor. He kept his eyes trained on Brooke while half-heartedly swaying to the music. But then a group of kids danced through the middle of the living room, and when they'd moved out of his line of sight, Brooke was gone. I've got to go, Luke muttered, pulling away from Tammy. She's not worth it, Tammy called at Luke's retreating back. But he didn't care. Something was wrong with Brooke, and he had to find out what. He pushed his way through the crowded dancers and into the equally crowded hallway. In the family room, he found a raucous game of Wii bowling, but no Brooke. In the common areas of the house, he found couples talking. None of them were her. The pool was full of laughing kids embroiled in a game of water volleyball. Brooke wouldn't be there. He ignored them and followed the pathway that led to the gazebo and garden. The noise from the pool grew faint as he disappeared into the trees, and then he saw the silhouette of Scrubs in a coat. She sat on the steps of the gazebo, knees tucked against her chest and arms encircling them. Her face was buried in her knees. What was wrong? Had someone hurt her? If Chris had made a play, Luke would kill him. Easy, he told himself. He didn't want to go all protective boyfriend on her and scare her off. He was just the friend, and a new one at that. Mind if I sit? Luke asked. Brooke jumped a little, then quickly wiped at her cheeks. It's a free country. Luke took that as a yes and sank onto the step beside her. Great party, he said when the silence was about to strangle him. Brooke shrugged. Yeah, I guess. I'm not really a party girl. Chris seems to think you came for him. Chris is delusional. Luke laughed. Yeah, I know. Why did you come? He really hadn't thought she'd show. Brooke traced circles on her knee with the tip of one finger. I just wanted to get out of the house for a while, I suppose. Brooke. Luke leaned forward, peered into her eyes. Even in the dark, he could see the glisten of tears. I thought we were friends now. Tell me what really happened tonight. I can tell something's wrong. Another shrug. Is it... He looked around, making sure they were truly alone. He wasn't sure if the subject was okay to broach. I mean, is it your parents? Her shoulders shook and her head fell back to her knees. Crap. Now he had made her cry. He reached forward as though to stroke her hair, then drew back. Would she be okay with that sort of thing? Slowly, he placed a hand on her head. When she didn't protest, he gently stroked her hair. I thought I was fine, but then Chris's parents showed up with their perfect marriage and responsibility and their caring, and it set me off. The words were muffled by her legs. My parents aren't getting back together. Shandy's pregnant. She looked up, and Luke quickly dropped his hand from her hair. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but he didn't know what else to say. My dad is picking them over us. It's like... She held her palms up as though that would help her know what to say. It's like he thinks he's screwed up, but instead of trying to fix our family, he's giving up and starting another one. Luke opened his mouth to offer comfort or advice, something, but shut it again. What could he say? His parents had always been rock solid. He had no idea what she was going through. That sucks, he finally said. She burst into tears again. And he had gone and made her cry. Luke patted her back. I'm sorry, I really stink at this. Brooke wiped at her cheeks with a shaky hand. You just said what I wanted to hear. No one ever admits how much this sucks. Thank you. His cheeks grew warm. It was nothing. When I first met you, I thought you were a total player. But you're not. At least not with me. I hope I'm not. He paused. Is that why you played hard to get? I wasn't playing hard to get. She went back to tracing circles on her knee, looking at the ground. You reminded me of my dad. Knowing what he did, Luke assumed that wasn't a compliment. It stung to know she thought of him like that. You strutted around English like you were a frickin' peacock with your pick of women or something. That's how Dad's been lately. It's like he's reverted back to this high school mentality. He's going through a midlife crisis or whatever. I'm not your dad. Luke remembered what his dad's advice had been, what he had cautioned him about in regards to Brooke. I'm sorry for hitting on you in the beginning. He nudged her shoulder. But it's your fault for being so hot. She blushed. Stop trying to make me feel better. It's the truth. I think you're cool, and I'm glad we're friends. He cleared his throat. I know things are rough for you right now, and I want you to know that you can talk to me about it. She furrowed her brow. How do I know this isn't a trick to get into my pants? Well, they're not my size, and bedazzled pockets aren't my thing anyway. Brooke reached out to slug him, and Luke laughed. I'm not trying to hook up with you. Scout's honor. You were never a Boy Scout, were you? Course not. I'm way too busy for that sort of thing. Now what's it got to take to convince you that I just want to be friends? I thought we had made progress the last 2 months. I don't know. She ran a hand through her hair. Chocolate and $1 million? I can get you that. Brooke laughed. I just can't trust guys. My parents' relationship was perfect, at least until a year ago, and he still cheated on her. Now all I hear from my mom is how awful guys are, how they only want to use you. I'm not your dad. I know that, but I'm not sure I believe it. I can't do more than I've already done. He stood, ready to leave. There was no point in sticking around if she wouldn't meet him halfway. Why does she get under my skin? He had his pick of any girl at the school, just like she said, but somehow he wanted her. Brooke grabbed his hand. Don't go. He raised an eyebrow and she quickly released him. What I mean is, I want us to continue being friends too. I'm trying to be your friend, but I'm a little tired of being pushed away. I'm afraid. She blushed. You're too hot, okay? I'm afraid we won't be just friends. So she did find him attractive. He started to grin in victory. This is what he wanted, to be more than friends. But his father's voice was in his head, telling him not to abuse her trust. How can I convince you this isn't a trick? She paused for a moment. What if we make rules? He folded his arms. This ought to be good. Rules? Yeah, I know it's stupid, but I'll feel better if we have clearly outlined boundaries, more in control. This girl was crazy, but he sank back down onto the step beside her. What kinds of rules? She snapped her fingers. Like no kissing on the lips under any circumstances, and no hugging. Hey now, friends hug. Okay, then no hugging for longer than 3 seconds. He couldn't help laughing. Brooke was adorable, and a little weird. Okay, fair enough. Anything else? We can hang out and go to movies and stuff, but only if we pay for ourselves. If you paid for me, it'd feel like a date. He lightly tapped her nose. You're a funny girl, Brooke Pierce. Her eyes darkened. You don't think making rules is dumb? You're nervous, I get it. I can deal with a few rules if it helps you relax. I reserve the right to add to them as I see fit. Fair enough. He stood, brushing off his pants. Now, is a friend allowed to hold a friend's hand so she doesn't trip in the dark? Brooke smiled. Yeah, I guess a friend could. Chapter 10. It had been about a week since Halloween, and Brooke had spent at least a few hours with Luke every single day. They fell into a comfortable rhythm as they ran laps around the gym during PE. Brooke glanced over at Luke, admiring his long stride for a minute, then forced herself to look away. Want to hang out after school? Luke asked. Sure. What'd you have in mind? Luke shrugged. Anything? Nothing? I invited you over, so you've got to decide what we do. Brooke grinned wickedly. You're telling me I get to pick? Yup. Then you're coming to my house. There's this modeling competition on TV that I love. I have about 4 episodes saved on my DVR. She couldn't wait to watch Luke's reaction to the show. Luke slowed his pace and Brooke followed suit. They only had a lap left and she easily slipped into cool-down mode. A modeling competition? Luke asked. Please tell me it's not Model at the Top. I see you've heard of it. Luke groaned. My mom's addicted, although she pretends she's not. Fine, we can go to your house and watch it, but only because we're friends. Brooke smiled. Luke was turning out to be an amazing friend. After school, they drove in Luke's car to Brooke's apartment. Is your mom at work? Luke asked as Brooke unlocked the door and flipped on the lights. Yep, Brooke confirmed. Her mom had quit her job when Brooke was born, and re-entering the workforce as a receptionist had been an adjustment for both of them. Do you like popcorn? Of course, Luke said. Great. Brooke pulled a bag out of the pantry and stuck it in the microwave. Model at the Top is way better with popcorn. I think you mean it's bearable with popcorn. You're going to love it, you'll see. After the popcorn was popped, Brooke sprinkled M&Ms on top and they settled down to watch TV. Brooke picked up the remote and started the first episode. You're coming in at a good time, she told Luke. I haven't started this new season yet. Oh, goody. Brooke swatted him on the arm. Stop being such a guy. Embrace the awesomeness that is the show. Luke remained quiet for the first few minutes. He threw an arm over the back of the couch and Brooke leaned into him, holding the bowl of popcorn between them. She became thoroughly engrossed with the show, caught up in the photo shoot challenge and the drama unfolding on screen. Tally-ho, that vermilion clashes with the chartreuse horrifically. Brooke snorted, popcorn flying from her mouth. She looked over at Luke, who gave an evil villain laugh. That is the worst English accent I've ever heard, Brooke said. He put a hand to his chest as though offended. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a born and bred Brit. He pointed to the screen. Next time, I'm bringing scorecards. These women are catty. It's only right that we rate their evilness. Brooke laughed, leaning her head on Luke's shoulder. His arms settled around her, pulling her tighter against him. Brooke closed her eyes and breathed deeply. This felt so good, so right. Luke was kind and funny and adorable. She could get used to this. Luke kissed the top of her head. Brooke bolted upright, sending popcorn spilling onto the couch. Luke jumped up as well, his eyes wide. "What, is there a spider?" A snort escaped, and Brooke covered her mouth with her hand. "You're scared of spiders?" "Well, I don't want them crawling all over me. Where is it? I'll squish it." "There's no spider." Brooke grabbed the remote off the couch and paused the television. "Then what's wrong?" "This!" She motioned a hand back and forth between them. "Didn't you feel it?" His brow furrowed. "Feel what?" "We act like we're dating." Luke sighed, running a hand through his hair. "So we were cuddling. Friends cuddle." "Are you sure about that?" "No, I've never been just friends with a girl. But if we like it, we should be able to cuddle." "I don't think so." Brooke folded her arms. Luke was a fantastic friend, but he was still a player at heart. He toned it down with her, sure, but she still saw him flirting with girls in the cafeteria, admiring them as they walked by. She wouldn't be another check in his little black book. She didn't want their friendship to end like that. "I'm making a new rule," Brooke said. "No cuddling." "Hey now, that's not fair. What are we supposed to do, sit on opposite ends of the couch?" He had a point, and cuddling had felt nice. "Okay, fine, we can cuddle." Luke's mouth quirked up in a grin, and Brooke quickly held up a hand. "But only if we're doing something else, like watching TV. Cuddling for cuddling's sake is out of the question. That's definitely boyfriend-girlfriend territory." Luke let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine. Can we finish the show now? I'm pretty sure Natalia's getting eliminated. She bombed that photo shoot." Brooke grinned. She appreciated that he was willing to go along with her silly rules. It made her like him even more. That weekend, Brooke and Luke went to the beach. While there, Brooke found out Luke had turned down a date for that same day because he had already made plans with her. Brooke freaked. That was something a boyfriend did, not a friend. So she made a rule that plans with each other could be broken for a real date as long as it was in advance. She wanted to make it clear they weren't together. Even though she sort of wanted to be. But no, it wasn't worth it. She loved the time she and Luke spent together as friends. It wasn't worth ruining that for a fling. And as far as she could tell, that was all Luke ever had. "People are starting to talk," Zoe told Brooke a few days later as they walked to lunch. "You two act like a couple." Brooke rolled her eyes. "We're not a couple. He went on a date with someone last night." Probably because of her freak out that weekend at the beach. "You're constantly together." "You and me are together a lot. No one thinks we're a couple." "That's because there's no sexual tension between us." Zoe batted her eyelashes. Brooke laughed. "There's no sexual tension between me and Luke either." "Oh, honey, you're lying to yourself." "I'm not." The two sank onto the floor and pulled their lunches out of their backpacks. "You can't honestly tell me you don't think Luke is hot," Zoe said. "Of course he's hot." Brooke pulled her sandwich out of the bag and took a bite. "I'd be blind not to realize how attractive he is. But knowing someone is attractive doesn't mean you're attracted to him. There's a big difference." And Brooke was a big, fat liar. Luke sat down across from them. "There's a big difference with what?" "We were talking about how Brooke thinks you're hot," Zoe said. Brooke's cheeks flamed. "That is not what I said." Luke grinned. "Yeah, Brooke already told me I was sexy. At the Halloween party." "I didn't say—" "It doesn't matter. We're just friends." "Of course." They ate for a few minutes in silence. Brooke had almost relaxed when Luke said, "Hey, Brooke." "Yeah?" she said. "We could always try being friends with benefits instead of friends with rules." That's when Zoe snorted soda up her nose and started to cough. Chapter 11. Maybe they weren't doomed to the friend zone. Maybe he could still break out of it. It was all Luke could think about as he ran laps with Brooke, Zoe, and Chris during gym class. Brooke had added more and more rules the last few weeks, and he was pretty sure he knew the reason why. Brooke was attracted to him, and it scared her. The coach blew the whistle, and Luke waved goodbye to the girls as he and Chris followed the rest of the guys to the boys' locker room. He hit the showers, then wandered back to his locker to get dressed. "Are you going to ask anyone to the winter formal?" Chris asked. Luke shrugged. "Maybe Brooke." He'd been batting the idea around in his head for a few days now, but he was nervous about how she'd react. Would she make another rule? He thought she'd probably say yes, as long as they went as friends, but wasn't sure. Chris snorted. "Like she'll say yes to you. Isn't there a rule about the two of you dating?" His lip curled up in a sneer. "There's a difference between dating and going on a date." "Well, me and Mike are thinking of getting a limo. He's going to ask Zoe. Want in?" "Yeah, could be fun." Luke capped his deodorant and shrugged a shirt over his head. "Who are you going to ask?" "I thought I'd ask Brooke." Luke's hands froze. He quickly tugged his shirt the rest of the way over his stomach. "My Brooke? The Brooke I just said I was asking?" "Hey, if I ask her first, you can't get mad. And you said you two aren't dating." He snapped his wet towel at Luke's legs, and Luke jumped back with a yelp. "You're friends, not a couple. She's allowed to date other people." Luke swore. "You're a piece of work." "I know, it's part of my charm." "She'll never agree to go out with you." "We'll see. May the best man win." Luke finished dressing in a daze. He couldn't let Chris ask Brooke to the dance. Couldn't stand the thought of Chris's hands wandering all over her body, his lips maybe touching hers. He couldn't handle the idea of Brooke smiling up at Chris, laughing at something he said. Okay, now he was being ridiculous. Brooke didn't even like Chris. Luke would just have to ask her first. But what if she flipped out? Create some rule against asking each other out on friend dates? Luke kneaded his temples with his fingers. How had hitting on the new girl turned so complicated so fast? Luke rushed out of the locker room to look for Brooke, but she must have already left for her next class. He gave up and went to history. He looked for her after that class too, but didn't find her before the tardy bell rang. He slipped into the last class of the day late, which earned him a glare from the teacher, but he didn't care. He had to get to Brooke before Chris did. With minutes left until the final bell, Luke packed up his backpack. The other students sat on top of their desks or chatted in small groups, waiting for the bell to ring. A hand settled on Luke's desk. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Mr. Daniels asked. "Really? This has to be right now?" He hoped he wasn't going to get in trouble for being late. "Sure," Luke said. He followed Mr. Daniels back to his desk. The teacher slid Luke's most recent chemistry test toward him and complimented Luke on his excellent score. He threw around words like AP chemistry and working the tutor lab, but Luke barely paid attention. The bell rang and students streamed out of the classroom. "Think about it," Mr. Daniels said, holding out a packet to Luke. "Registration for next year will be here in just a few months." "Thanks, Mr. Daniels," Luke said. He snatched the paper and ran from the classroom. He found Brooke and Zoe outside, sitting under some palm trees. "Hey, ladies." Luke sank into the grass next to them. Chris was nowhere to be seen. Hallelujah. "What are you doing?" "Homework," Zoe said. "It's such a nice day and I don't want to go home," Brooke added. "Dad and Mom have another counseling session, so she's going to be in a rotten mood." Luke frowned sympathetically. "Care if I join you?" Brooke's brow creased. "Don't you work today?" Crap. Yeah, thanks for reminding me." He had 3 appointments to install phones for hearing-impaired customers that afternoon. He felt like an idiot for forgetting. "I'll just sit here until I have to leave in a few minutes." "Aren't you going to tell him, Brooke?" Zoe asked. Luke's heart constricted. He didn't. Tell me what? Chris asked her to the winter formal. He did. But when? Luke swallowed hard. Some friend Chris was. When? And what did you say? Brooke blushed. Just barely, right before you showed up. I was flustered. Yes sort of popped out before I really thought about it. She turned to Zoe. Why did you let me say yes? Chris is kind of cocky, but he's fun, Zoe said. And you need to have fun. It'll be good for you. But Luke heard the undercurrent of jealous in Zoe's voice. It's weird. I can tell you like him, Zoe. Zoe made a psh sound with her mouth. You're going as friends, and Mike already asked me. Go, have fun. We get to ride in a limo and eat a fancy meal. If you don't feel comfortable with it, tell him no, Luke said. I'll take you myself if you really want to go. Brooke's eyes pierced his soul. You mean like a date? He rubbed his neck uncomfortably. If you're okay with it. Brooke pursed her lips. I think casual dates are okay, but only if we're helping each other out. Like if you have a work party or something. She flushed. I mean, once we get real jobs. She sees us remaining friends after high school. His heart soared. So you'll go to the dance with me? Slowly, she shook her head. I don't want you and Chris to fight. He's your best friend. I think you fill that role now. She smiled shyly. I'll go to the dance with Chris. I already told him yes. Is there a reason I shouldn't feel comfortable with him? Chris is a ladies' man. So are you. Zoe pointed a finger at Luke. Girl has a point. Luke sighed. Just be on your guard, okay? Don't let him slobber all over you. Brooke made a face. Ew. Well, you're going out with Chris. He's not exactly an old-fashioned gentleman. Good thing I'm not a loose woman, then. He had been too late. Brooke was going out with Chris, and there was nothing Luke could do about it. Chapter 12. I don't want to go, Brooke said. The flutters in her stomach felt a lot more like icky moths than happy butterflies. Zoe sighed. Why can't you accept that this will be fun? It feels like a lot of pressure. There's only pressure if you put it there. It's a date, not a proposal. I know, I'll try to have fun. Brooke fussed with her dress, adjusting the skirts for the 1200th time. Stop touching your dress, you look perfect. Zoe turned Brooke around so that she faced the full-length mirror. Luke won't be able to keep his eyes off of you. Brooke had to admit, she did look good. The navy blue dress shimmered in the light, hugging her body and flaring at the hips into an A-line skirt. Her hair was swept up on top of her head with rhinestones pinned so that they glittered when she moved. There was only one problem. Did you already forget that Chris is my date? Brooke asked. Course not, but we both know it's Luke you really like. We're just friends. So you say. Brooke chewed on her lip, then quickly released it so she wouldn't mess up her lip gloss. They were just friends, but sometimes she wanted to be more. The doorbell rang and Zoe clapped her hands. They're here! Brooke groaned and Zoe whacked her with her clutch. Be nice, Zoe said. We're going to have a fabulous time tonight. That was my last complaint, I promise, Brooke said. She pasted on a smile. I'm ready to have fun. Brooke followed Zoe down the stairs. Brooke's mom had wanted to see her off to the dance but hadn't been able to get out of work, so Brooke had gotten ready for the date at Zoe's. Zoe's parents were already at the door, welcoming the boys and telling them how handsome they looked. Brooke took a deep breath and put on her happy face. She didn't need to be so freaked out by a date. Wow. Chris let out a whistle, wrapping his arms around Brooke and kissing her on the cheek. The kiss was sloppy, but Brooke smiled, playing her part. I'm a lucky man to have you on my arm tonight. You look nice too, Brooke said. His suit fit him well, and he did look handsome. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Zoe greet Mike with a hug. Zoe's parents took photos, and then they were out the door. Brooke climbed into the limo first. Her eyes immediately landed on Luke. She hadn't realized how amazing he'd look in a tux. It made his shoulders look broader and matured his appearance by at least 5 years. Even sitting down, she could tell the tux fit like it was made for him. Hi, Brooke. Brooke tore her gaze from Luke. She gave his date a weak smile. Brooke couldn't remember the girl's name. Tiffany or Brittany or Stacy. Some such name that ended in an I dotted with a heart. The girl was in student government and popular, which meant she was Luke's type. Hey, Brooke said to I with a heart. Zoe sank into the leather seats and giggled. This ride is amazing. Amazing was the dimple in Luke's cheek every time he grinned. Amazing was the dark plum of his vest, which complemented his complexion perfectly. Amazing was the way her heart fluttered when he smiled at her. Luke's date reached out and placed a hand on his knee. Brooke looked away. The limo filled with excited chatter as the driver pulled onto the road. Brooke's stomach swarmed, and this time they were definitely happy butterflies. What's wrong with me? Yeah, Luke was hot, but so was Chris, and he definitely didn't elicit the same response. Thank heaven for the rules that stopped her from doing something stupid like falling for Luke. Fun was allowed, but a relationship was not in the cards right now. You look nice, Luke whispered, his leg brushing hers as he leaned forward to say the words. Brooke shivered, curling her fingers into her hands. Thanks. The words were barely a whisper. I, with a heart, placed a hand on Luke's arm, bringing his attention back to her. Chris said something to Brooke, and she smiled and nodded. Time to focus on her date, and not Luke. Dinner was loud, the restaurant teeming with overly excited teenagers on their way to the dance. Chris kept touching Brooke possessively, her knee, her back, her hand. Brooke tried to ignore him and involve herself in the conversation at the table, but Luke kept distracting her with his sexy voice and luscious lips and warm eyes. Brooke was relieved when they finally left the restaurant and headed to the dance. Surely she couldn't be distracted by Luke there. She'd always loved dancing, and if the Halloween party was any indication, Chris was great at it. They'd only danced for one song, but it had been fun. In the limo, Chris rested his hand on Brooke's thigh. She pushed it off, but all that resulted in was him taking her hand in his. At the school, Zoe and Mike quickly disappeared onto the dance floor. Luke and I with a heart soon followed, leaving Brooke and Chris alone. Let's dance, Chris said, taking Brooke's hand. A slow song came on, and Brooke let Chris wrap his hands around her waist while she put her hands on his shoulders. Brooke tried to relax and enjoy the moment, but her eyes kept following Luke and I with a heart, who rested her head on his shoulder as they danced. Did Luke like his date? Did he have feelings for her? What does it matter? You're just friends. And that's when she felt it. Chris's hand on her butt. Brooke reached back and grabbed his hand, placing it on her back where it belonged. What was that about? She asked. What? His face was the picture of innocence. Brooke narrowed her eyes. She broke away from Chris and walked off the dance floor. Chris followed, laughing. Don't be like that, Brooke. I was playing around. It was not playing around, Brooke said, her breath coming hard. It's called sexual harassment, and I don't appreciate it. Chris grabbed her hand, tugging her toward the gym doors. Brooke pulled her hand away, but Chris grabbed it again. You're making a scene, he said. We could talk about this in the hallway. Brooke glanced around. Sure enough, people were starting to stare. She reluctantly followed him from the dance. The sounds of the gym faded away as they headed toward his locker. I'm not someone you can manhandle, Brooke said when the music had all but disappeared. Don't ever touch my butt again. Chris laughed. You liked it, and you know it, Brooke. You've been playing hard to get for months, and I'm sick of it. I'm not playing hard to get. I really don't like you like that. Not really at all. That's because you haven't gotten to know me. Chris grabbed Brooke around the waist, pulling her close. His lips were on hers before Brooke knew what was happening, rough and wet. He pressed her against the lockers, one of the dials digging into her spine. Brooke pushed against his shoulders, desperate to move away from his oppressive weight. When that didn't work, she brought her knee up, connecting hard with his crotch. Chris let go and Brooke ducked out of his grip. "If you ever try something like that again, I will have you arrested!" Brooke yelled at Chris. He hunched on the floor, groaning. Brooke turned to leave and nearly ran into Luke. His jaw was clenched, his face a mask of fury. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked. Brooke nodded. "Did you see that?" "I got here in time to see you knee him." Luke grabbed Chris by the shoulder and hauled him into a standing position. Chris let out a groan. "She's a crazy chick," he said. "You saw what she did." "Yeah, I did." Luke pulled back his fist and hit Chris hard in the face. Blood gushed from Chris's nose and Luke's knuckles came away red. "Luke!" Brooke grabbed his arm, keeping him from landing another punch. "He's not worth it." Chris swore and called Brooke a foul name. He spit and blood splattered on the floor. "You can have her," he told Luke. "Get out of here before I find a teacher. If I ever see you near Brooke again, I'll jump you." Chris walked by them, glaring. He spit again, clearly aiming for Brooke. She jumped back just in time, and the blood-laced saliva landed to the left of her shoe. Chris disappeared around the corner. Luke's arms wrapped around Brooke, and she leaned into him. She wanted to stay in his embrace forever, safe and protected. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah, Chris didn't do more than kiss me." She brought a hand to her lips and wiped. Her shoulders started to shake, a reaction to the adrenaline wearing off. Luke cursed. "I should have seen it coming. He's always been a jerk to girls." "I'm sorry I ruined your night," Brooke said. "Where's your date?" "She's the one who saw you leave with Chris and told me something looked off. She told me to come find you." Brooke raised an eyebrow in surprise. Maybe she had misjudged Eye with a heart. "I'm glad she did." "Me too. I'm more worried about you than ruining my date. Are you sure you're okay?" Brooke nodded, but her eyes clouded with tears. Luke pulled her into a hug, and Brooke rested her head against his chest. For just a moment, she was going to ignore the 3-second rule she had made and enjoy the feel of his arms around her. How had she found herself falling for Luke? It wasn't fair. Chapter 13. It had been all Luke could do to stop himself from beating Chris to within an inch of his life. When he'd seen him pressed against Brooke, his mouth all over hers. If Brooke hadn't stopped him, Luke would have gone all Jackie Chan on Chris. "I really am sorry," Brooke said, pulling away from the hug. It wasn't lost on Luke that she had let him hold her for significantly longer than 3 seconds. "Tiffany must hate me." "Brittany," Luke corrected. "I'll explain it to her and she'll understand. She's really nice." "Okay, then Chris, I've ruined your friendship." "I don't want to be friends with someone like that." He linked her hands with his. "Stop apologizing. You did nothing wrong." "I should let you get back to your date," Brooke said. Luke shook his head. "Not a chance. No way I'm leaving you alone." "You're not being fair to Brittany." Luke let out a growl. "You were just attacked." "You make it sound so dramatic." Brooke grabbed his hand. "Come on. I'm getting you back to your date." Back in the gym, it didn't take long for Luke to locate Brittany. She was on the dance floor with some friends and didn't look any the worse for being abandoned by her date. Luke tugged on Brooke's hand, eager to take advantage of the opportunity. "Come on." Brooke shook her head. "Brittany is having a good time," Luke finished. He pointed to his date. "Give me one dance." Brooke nodded, a smile turning up her lips. One dance, then you go back to Brittany. Luke didn't say anything, just pulled Brooke through the crowd and onto the dance floor. He held up his hand for Brooke to take and rested his other around her waist. Brooke smiled shyly, swaying with him to the music. You take the traditional dance pose, huh? Of course. None of this dancing in a circle crap for me. Luke spun her out and then back into his arms. A true gentleman, Brooke laughed. Then she became serious. Thank you for saving me tonight. Chris is a creep. I hope I never see him again, Luke said. Besides, what are friends for? Right. Friends. Luke pulled Brooke close, his cheek touching hers. I was so angry when I saw him all over you. You've come to mean a lot to me the last few months. I feel the same way. Luke took a deep breath, then plunged. We don't have to be just friends. We can get rid of the rules. I'm not like Chris or your dad. I'd be a good boyfriend. Brooke was quiet for a moment, and Luke thought she might agree. His heart raced in anticipation. No, Brooke said finally. I'm sorry, Luke, but we can only ever be friends. Why? He demanded. He tightened his hold on her hand. He didn't want her to ever let go. That's how I want it to be. Luke growled in frustration. I think you're lying. I know you're attracted to me. Brooke touched his cheek with her hand. What we have is so much more important to me than a high school romance. I won't ruin that by dating. I know you don't understand, but this is how I want it. Please. I like you, Brooke. I could easily like you as more than a friend. I know, but if we go down that route, it'll ruin everything. Or it could be the beginning of everything. Brooke sighed and rested her head on Luke's shoulder. Can't we just enjoy being friends? Luke wanted to argue, but he was learning to read Brooke. Her tired sigh, the way she tapped her fingers in a rhythm against his back, the firm set of her jaw. She wouldn't budge, and if he pushed too hard, he'd lose the friendship they were beginning to build. Friends, Luke agreed. For now. Maybe if he was patient, something would change. He had to believe that. The song's almost over, Brooke said. Time to get back to your date. Luke glanced over at Brittany again. She still danced with friends. I don't think she's missing me. Well, she's crazy then. Brooke smiled, and he recognized it for what it was. A request to let things return to normal between them. Luke would oblige. For now. I'm going to the aquarium tomorrow afternoon so I can write a paper for biology, Brooke said. Want to come with me? Luke grinned. She had turned him down, yes, but she hadn't said she didn't return his feelings. For now, he'd let her do things her way. Absolutely. Acknowledgements. As always, this book wouldn't have been possible without a lot of encouragement and help. First and foremost, thank you to my husband, who tells me things like, don't worry about cleaning the bathrooms, I'll do it while you write. Seriously, are there sexier words than those? I think not. Thank you to my kids, who frequently allow me to edit uninterrupted for at least 3 minutes at a time while they play. Thank you to my accountability partners, Candace and Liz. They are always honest and encouraging, which is exactly what I need. To my critique group, the authorities, Lachelle, Darren, Jacob, and David. They keep me constantly striving to improve my writing and are always spot on with their feedback. To all my I Write friends, they always make me feel welcome and awesome. To my beta readers, you rock. My books would be awful without you. And most of all, to my readers. Knowing people are reading and enjoying my stories keeps me going. About the author. Lindzee Armstrong met her match at Utah State University, although she was technically in high school at the time. She and Mr. Armstrong became engaged quickly and fell in love even quicker. He wasn't a high school student, but still thoughtfully offered to take her to prom in her wedding dress. She declined. Wearing the wedding dress before the big day just seemed weird. A few years after getting married, they welcomed twin boys into the world. Lindsee loves chick flicks, ice cream, and chocolate, like any true romantic. She believes in sigh-worthy kisses and happily ever afters. Meet Your Match is the first story in the No Match for Love series. To find out about future releases, you can sign up for Lindzee's newsletter at lindzeearmstrong.com. You can also find her on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please take a few minutes to leave a review. This is the best way you can say thank you to an author and narrator. It really helps other listeners discover audiobooks they might enjoy. Thank you. For more information on the narrator, Tiffany Williams, please visit airbendingmediaproductions.com or find her on Facebook and Twitter. This has been Meet Your Match, No Match for Love. Written by Lindzee Armstrong. Narrated by Tiffany Williams. Produced by Airbending Media Productions, LLC. Copyright 2015 by Lindzee Armstrong. Production copyright 2015 by Lindzee Armstrong.